I didn't know words could bruise until the day my children walked into the house without speaking. Usually, my son raced ahead, shoes forgotten, backpack swinging like a loose promise. My daughter followed him, talking nonstop about school, about tiny victories that felt big to her. That afternoon, though, they moved slowly, like guests in their own home. Their eyes stayed low, their voices were gone. I asked what happened. They shook their heads. I tried again while setting dinner. Still nothing. It wasn't until bedtime, when my daughter clutched my sleeve instead of letting go, that she finally whispered, "Mom, are you a failure?" The word hit me harder than any slap ever could. I knelt in front of her, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Who said that?" She hesitated, looked at her brother, then she said it. "Grandma did. Dad's wife. She said you ruined the family, that you couldn't keep a marriage, that Dad had to build everything again because of you." My hands went cold. My stepmother-in-law, my ex-husband's second wife, had always smiled too tightly around me, polite insults wrapped in sweet tones. But this, saying it to my children? I tucked them into bed that night with extra care, whispering reassurances I wasn't sure they believed. After the lights went off, I sat alone on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall like it might explain how things had come to this. Once I had been part of that family. Once I had helped build everything they now lived off. But after the divorce, the story changed. Suddenly, I was the woman who couldn't handle pressure, the emotional one, the failure. My ex-husband never corrected them. Silence was easier. Letting others rewrite history cost him nothing. Or so he thought. I remembered the early days, working late nights, unpaid, balancing spreadsheets while rocking a baby with my foot. I remembered signing papers without reading too closely because I trusted him. I remembered the company being nothing but an idea and a rented office with flickering lights. Back then, his stepmother-in-law hadn't wanted anything to do with us. No money in it yet, no power, no prestige. Now she wore luxury like she'd earned it. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I did something far more dangerous. I checked my old files. Emails, contracts, incorporation documents saved on a forgotten drive I'd kept just in case. I hadn't opened that folder in years. Maybe I was scared of what I'd find, or maybe I was scared of what it would mean. There it was, my name. Not as a witness, not as a spouse, as an owner, a majority owner. My breath caught. I remembered the conversation clearly now, how he'd begged me to put things in my name temporarily because of tax issues, how he'd said, "It's just paperwork. You know this is ours." Ours. Funny how words change after lawyers get involved. I closed the laptop slowly. They had called me a failure. They had told my children I was nothing. And they had completely forgotten one small detail. I still owned the foundation beneath their feet. But before I could confront them, I learned my stepmother had planned something far worse, something that would force me to decide whether to stay silent forever or take everything back. I wasn't supposed to know about the dinner. That much became clear the moment I heard about it. From my son, not from my ex-husband. "They're having a celebration," he said quietly while doing his homework. "Dad said it's adults only. Grandma said kids shouldn't see people who make bad choices." Bad choices. That was me. I smiled for my son. I told him adults say foolish things sometimes, but inside, something twisted hard and sharp. A celebration meant the company, anniversaries, profits, milestones, and I knew whose hands were missing from the applause. Mine. That night, after the kids fell asleep, I checked social media. I shouldn't have. I knew better, but curiosity can be cruel. There it was, my stepmother standing at the center of a long table, crystal glasses raised, her smile wide and victorious. The caption read, "Family success tastes sweeter when earned." Earned. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. I remembered that same woman once telling me I wasn't business-minded enough to sit in meetings. I remembered how she laughed when I suggested expanding the company into new markets, ideas my ex-husband later took credit for, proudly. The next morning, I got a call. It was my ex-husband. His voice was careful, polite, the way people speak when they're hiding something. "Listen," he said, "I heard the kids were upset about something that was said. I'll talk to them, but let's not blow this out of proportion." Out of proportion. I asked him if he'd heard what his stepmother told our children. He sighed, not in anger, in annoyance. "She didn't mean it that way," he said. "You know how she talks." Yes, I did. She talked like she was untouchable. Then he added, almost casually, "Also, I'd appreciate it if you didn't show up around company events anymore. It's confusing. People might get the wrong idea." I gripped the phone tighter. "The wrong idea about what?" I asked. "About ownership, about roles, about who belongs where." There it was. Not cruelty, erasure. I agreed, calmly, too calmly. Then I hung up and laughed once, a short, broken sound that didn't belong to joy. That afternoon, I met with a lawyer, not to threaten, not to storm in dramatically, to understand. The lawyer didn't need much time. She flipped through the documents, raised an eyebrow, and looked directly at me. "They've been operating under the assumption you'd never assert this. Legally speaking, that assumption is dangerous." I asked what would happen if I did nothing. She answered honestly, "They'll continue rewriting you out of the story, and eventually they'll succeed." That night, my daughter asked me if she should stop telling people where her dad worked because Grandma said it was embarrassing to mention the past. The past. I held my child close and felt something inside me settle. Not rage, resolve. They weren't just disrespecting me anymore. They were shaping my children's reality, and that was something I could not forgive. I drafted a message, then deleted it. I thought about confronting my stepmother directly, imagined her dismissive smile, her condescending tone, the way she'd deny everything and accuse me of being dramatic. No, I didn't want an argument. I wanted accountability. I wanted silence, followed by realization. Before bed, I checked the company calendar. Another event was coming, bigger than the dinner. Investors, press, speeches, and for the first time, my name was still on the official documents, just hidden, just waiting. They thought I'd stay invisible. They thought silence meant weakness. But in the next part, I would step into a room where my presence would change everything, and my stepmother would realize her biggest mistake. The invitation arrived 2 days later. Not addressed to me, of course not. It came through a public company announcement, a milestone meeting, press present, major investors attending. The kind of gathering meant to cement legacies and celebrate leadership. Leadership I had once helped shape. I didn't RSVP. I didn't announce my arrival. I simply showed up. The building looked different than I remembered. Glass walls, polished floors, a confidence it hadn't earned alone. I walked in calmly, dressed plainly, carrying nothing but a slim folder and years of restraint. The receptionist looked up, ready to stop me. Then she saw my name on the access list. Her smile faltered. "Welcome," she said after a pause. "They're already inside." The conference room buzzed with quiet power. Men in tailored suits, women with sharp eyes and sharper notebooks. At the head of the table stood my ex-husband, speaking smoothly about growth, vision, and resilience. His stepmother sat nearby, nodding proudly, fingers wrapped around a glass of water like it was champagne. I took a seat. No one noticed at first. Then my ex-husband did. His voice faltered mid-sentence, just a beat, barely visible to anyone else, but I knew him well enough to recognize panic hiding behind professionalism. Our eyes met. He recovered quickly, finished his point and moved on, pretended I was just another observer. But his stepmother leaned over and whispered something to him, her smile tight. That's when I stood. "I'd like to add something," I said calmly. The room fell silent. My ex-husband opened his mouth, probably to object, but the moderator glanced at the agenda, then at me. "You're listed as a majority stakeholder. Please, go ahead." The color drained from my stepmother's face. I didn't look at her yet. I spoke to the room instead. "I helped establish this company when it had no reputation," I said. "I handled early operations, financial structuring, and strategic planning during its most vulnerable phase. I stepped away from daily involvement for personal reasons, but my legal stake never changed." Murmurs rippled around the table. My ex-husband finally spoke. "This isn't the time." "This is exactly the time," I replied, still calm, still steady. I opened my folder and slid copies of the documents across the table. Ownership percentages, signatures, dates, facts. The moderator reviewed them carefully. Investors leaned forward. Phones stayed off, but attention was absolute. My stepmother stood abruptly. "This is inappropriate," she snapped, dragging personal matters into professional space. I turned to her then. "I told my children their mother was a failure. This is what failure looks like when it stops staying quiet." Her mouth opened, closed. She sat down slowly. I didn't ask for applause. I didn't demand apologies. I made one thing clear. "I will be exercising my rights moving forward. Transparency will be restored, and respect, especially towards my family, will no longer be optional." The meeting ended early. People avoided eye contact on the way out. Some nodded at me respectfully. Others looked confused, unsettled. My ex-husband approached me in the hallway afterward. "You blindsided me," he said, voice low. "No," I replied. "You erased me. This is me correcting the record." He asked what I wanted. I looked at him for a long moment. "I want my children protected from your family's bitterness, and I want you to remember who helped build the ground you stand on." He didn't answer. That evening my phone buzzed. A message from his stepmother. 3 words: "We need to talk." But when she finally spoke to me face to face, I realized this wasn't about apologies, it was about control, and she wasn't ready to let go. We met at a quiet cafe the next afternoon. My stepmother chose the place. "Neutral ground," she said. "Somewhere public, controlled." I arrived early and sat near the window, watching people pass by, wondering how someone could feel so powerful while standing on someone else's foundation. She walked in 10 minutes late. Perfect posture, perfect hair, The same woman who once told my children I was nothing now looked uncertain. She didn't waste time. "You embarrassed us," she said, sitting down without greeting me. I smiled faintly. "I told the truth." She folded her hands. "That meeting wasn't the place for family drama." "You brought family into it when you spoke to my kids," I replied. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. She sighed, like I was exhausting her. "I was trying to motivate them. Children need strong examples." "By tearing down their mother?" She looked away. Not ashamed, calculating. "You walked away from the company," she said. "People assumed you weren't capable of handling success." I leaned forward slightly. "People assumed what you let them assume." Her jaw tightened. "You helped my stepson rebuild after you left. I stabilized things. I protected what he worked for." I almost laughed. "You protected your position," I corrected, "and you taught my children that cruelty equals strength." She crossed her arms. "Let's be practical. You've made your point. Now step back again. Take a payout. Sign away your shares." There it was. No apology. No regret. Just a transaction. I shook my head slowly. "You don't get to insult me, poison my children, then buy my silence." Her voice hardened. "Do you know how disruptive this could be? Investors don't like instability." Neither do children, especially when they're told their mother failed at life. Her eyes flashed. "You're overreacting." I stood. "I'm responding," I said. "Something I should have done years ago." She warned me, thinly veiled threats about legal battles, reputations, stress. I listened politely. Then I left. That evening, my ex-husband called. This time, he wasn't calm. "You could destroy everything," he said. "Why are you doing this now?" I thought of my daughter's small voice. "Are you a failure?" "Because silence taught my kids the wrong lesson, and I won't let that continue." He didn't argue after that. 2 days later, a letter arrived from the company's legal department. Not hostile, careful. They wanted to restructure leadership roles. Translation: they were scared. And for the first time, I realized something important. They hadn't forgotten who owned the company. They had hoped I had. But the real shift came that weekend, when my son came home from his father's house, quieter than usual. "Grandma said, 'You're trying to take things away from Dad,'" he said. I knelt beside him. "No," I said, gently. "I'm making sure no one takes things away from us." He nodded slowly, trusting me. That trust mattered more than any company ever could. But my stepmother wasn't finished, and the next move she made would cross a line so deeply, even my ex-husband wouldn't be able to defend her. The call came from the school. I knew something was wrong the moment I heard the secretary's tone, polite, careful, and nervous in a way that meant adults were trying not to panic children. "There's been a situation involving your children," she said. "Nothing physical, but we need you to come in." My heart didn't race. It sank. When I arrived, my son sat stiffly in a chair outside the counselor's office. My daughter clung to him, eyes red. Across from them sat my stepmother, smiling. "She insisted on being here," the counselor whispered to me. "She said she had legal authority." I looked at my stepmother. "You don't." She waved a hand dismissively. I was concerned. Concerned. Inside the office, the counselor explained that my stepmother had told my children they might need to adjust to changes at home soon, that their mother was creating instability, that courts sometimes had to step in when adults made poor choices. My daughter had started crying. My son had asked if he'd be taken away from me. I felt something inside me go completely still. This wasn't manipulation anymore. This was fear. I turned to my stepmother. "You are not allowed to speak to my children without my consent." She smiled thinly. I was only preparing them. For what? A lie? The counselor cleared her throat. "We'll be documenting this." Good. I took my children home early that day. We ate ice cream for lunch and watched movies under blankets. I told them no one was taking them anywhere. I told them the truth, carefully, kindly. That night, after they slept, I called my lawyer. "This stops now," I said. By morning, cease and desist letters were sent, one to my stepmother, one to my ex-husband. Clear language, firm boundaries. He called me an hour later. "She went too far," he admitted quietly. That was new. "You need to choose," I told him. "Your children's safety or her control." Silence. Then, "I'll handle it." For the first time in years, I believed him. The company fallout came quickly. Investors don't like family drama involving children. Boards don't like liability. Suddenly, my stepmother's advisory role was under review. She showed up at my door that evening. No smile this time. "You're turning everyone against me," she said. "You did that yourself," I replied. She accused me of revenge, of bitterness, of trying to erase her. I laughed softly. "You erased yourself the moment you scared my kids." She left without another word. 2 days later, my ex-husband filed paperwork, quietly removing her from all company involvement. No announcement, no ceremony, just consequences. That night, my son hugged me longer than usual. "Grandma won't come to school anymore," he said. "No," I promised. "She won't." I thought it was over. I was wrong. Because losing power doesn't make people repent, it makes them desperate. And her final attempt would force me to choose between peace and complete truth. I've found out the same way I found out most betrayals, by accident. An old colleague from the company emailed me late one night. No greeting, no small talk. "You deserve to know what she did back then." Attached were scanned documents I hadn't seen in years. Internal emails, meeting notes, a resignation letter I never wrote. My name stared back at me, typed neatly at the bottom of a page I didn't recognize. My stepmother had forged it. Not recently, years ago, right after my divorce. I scrolled slowly, my hands shaking, not with anger, but with clarity. She had quietly positioned herself as the stabilizing force, while painting me as unreliable, emotional, unfit for leadership. She hadn't just filled a gap, she'd created one. Suddenly, everything made sense. The speed with which I'd been removed from decisions, the way my access had slowly disappeared, the confidence with which she told my children I was a failure. She had been rehearsing that lie for years. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. Her response came fast. "This changes everything." The next morning, my ex-husband came over unannounced. He looked older, tired, smaller. "She admitted it," he said quietly. "Not the forgery, just that she helped move things along." I showed him the documents. He sat down hard. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear." I believed him. That didn't excuse him. "She destroyed my reputation," I said, "and you let it happen." He nodded. "I know." Legal action followed. Not loud, not public. The board didn't want scandal. They wanted resolution. They wanted the truth handled quietly. My stepmother was forced to step down from every role. Contracts dissolved, influence gone. But the real moment came later that evening, when she called me. Her voice cracked. "If this comes out, I lose everything." I thought of my children, their fear, their confusion. "I'm not interested in destroying you. I'm interested in protecting them." She begged, actually begged. I told her the conditions. She would never contact my children again. She would publicly correct the narrative without naming me, and she would sign a statement acknowledging her actions. Silence. Then a quiet, "Fine." The next week, an internal company memo circulated. It praised early contributors previously overlooked. My name was restored in records, not loudly, but permanently. At home, my daughter asked me something unexpected. "Mom, does being strong mean being loud?" I smiled and pulled her close. "No, sometimes it means telling the truth, even when it's scary." I thought that was the end. I was wrong again, because some truths, once uncovered, don't stay contained. In the final part, everything would come full circle when my stepmother tried to rewrite the story one last time, and I chose how it would truly end.
The article went live on a Monday morning. I wasn't tagged, I wasn't quoted, but I knew exactly who had pushed it. Former executive claims credit for company success after years of absence. The wording was careful, legal, poisonous. My stepmother's last move. She hadn't mentioned my children. She hadn't mentioned the forgery. She had simply suggested that I was confused about timelines and emotionally attached to a past that no longer applied. I closed the browser calmly. Once, this would have broken me. Now, it only clarified my choice. By noon, my lawyer called. "We can respond publicly, or we can end this permanently." I chose permanent. That afternoon, the company released a full historical report, audited, time-stamped, undeniable. Early ownership, early leadership, early decisions. My name appeared again and again, not as a victim, as a founder. The article quietly disappeared 2 days later. No apology, no explanation, just gone. My stepmother didn't call after that. She moved, changed numbers, slipped out of the family like she'd never been there at all. My ex-husband and I established new boundaries, clear ones. Co-parenting focused on the kids, not the past. He never asked for forgiveness. He showed it instead. Months later, the company celebrated another milestone. This time, I was invited properly. I declined. Some rooms no longer deserved me. That evening, I sat at home helping my daughter with homework. She had to write about someone she admired. She wrote my name. When I asked why, she said, "Because you didn't let them decide who you were." I hugged her and felt something settle that no courtroom or boardroom ever could. They had called me a failure. They had tried to erase me. But here's what they forgot. Success isn't owning a company. Power isn't controlling a story. Strength is standing still long enough for the truth to catch up. And when it did, it remembered my name.